Think of life without language, unable to voice your feelings, unable to gather ideas, unable to hold thoughts in your own head. That's what life was like for a group of children in Nicaragua. They are deaf and they were offered no education. These kids had never heard a conversation or seen a sign language in their lives. This is the story of how that group of lost children did something that has astounded modern science. Left alone, they created a language all their own. For the first time in history, we are witness to the birth of a language that tells us a great deal about what it is to be human. Judy Mejia has a lot to say about the joys of being 9 years old, but you've never seen a child say it like this.
When you asked me how I played, I would go and I would play hide and go seek, and somebody would hide and you'd have to find 4 people. You know, they would be hiding and I'd look under and I would find them. That's how we played.
What you are watching is an entirely new human language, unlike any other sign language in the world today. It has its own words, grammar, and precision. In this conversation, you can't be careless with your hands.
What is it like now in school?
She's trying to read your gestures.
Oh.
She's looking at me like, I'm not getting very much.
It doesn't mean a thing, I'm afraid.
What's astonishing is that the new language was invented by children. These scenes from the 1980s are among the first pictures of a language being born. These kids invented it because they were desperate. To be deaf in Nicaragua was to be lost. Deaf children were shut-ins or sent to schools for the mentally retarded. Not one of these children had ever seen a sign language before, but within months of being brought together, they had written one of their own. No one had ever put together a successful program to educate the deaf children of Nicaragua. But in 1979, after the Sandinista Revolution, the government thought it would try. So it set up 2 schools in Managua and brought in deaf kids from all around the country. Trouble was, the kids had never been exposed to language in their lives, so they couldn't understand what the teachers were saying, and the teachers couldn't understand them. Then, something extraordinary happened. The children began comparing the signs that they'd been using at home. They added to them, modified them, and soon, even though the teachers still didn't know what was going on, the children were talking to each other. Mystified, the Nicaraguans called in Shepard-Kegl, an American linguist who studies language and the brain.
I said, what do you want from me? And there was a group of kids about 25 feet from us with their hands flapping in the air. And they said, well, we want to know what they're talking about. When they're talking to each other, we can't understand it.
As Kegl recorded the conversation, she began to understand that this was no jumble of gestures, but true language with precise rules and order.
And they just took that whole thing and restructured it and gave you back the equivalent of English, French, American Sign Language, whatever you want to call it, equal.
And they did it on their own.
And they did it on their own. They literally took it all from here. All the structure, all the rules. What they took was the raw materials. They took a gesture here, something that happened there that didn't constitute language at all, dragged it in and used it to express a system that was up here.
A system that Kegl believes is proof that the brain has an instinct for communication, that language is launched from within.
You know, it's like a rocket going off in your head, just an understanding that soars.
Adrian Perez was one of those children liberated by language. Today, he teaches the new language known simply as Nicaraguan Sign Language. He lost his hearing to a fever when he was a toddler. He was born into a happy family, but as a deaf boy in Nicaragua, it was joy he could not share.
You feel like when you don't have communication, you almost don't have thought. You know, no awareness. It's an emptiness.
If you don't have language, you don't have thought.
You know, for me, it's sad. You can't express your feelings. You can't express, your thoughts may be there, but you can't get them out, and you can't get new thoughts in. You know, it's like there's a door that you're beating against and beating against, you know, like a bull going against a wall, butting your head against a wall, and you just can't make it open.
Kegl wondered if she could find others in Nicaragua still trapped behind that wall. She's an authority on how the brain creates language. If she could find people who had not been reached by the new sign language, people with no language at all, it would be a scientific breakthrough. a window on how language evolved in the first place. Kegl thought that journey of discovery would last a few weeks. That was 15 years ago. Today, she is still traveling the rainforests of Nicaragua's Mosquito Coast, finding what no linguist believed could ever be found: human beings without language.
And you find them out here. They exist.
Find them. For every 12,000 people, you should have 10 who are deaf. So here, you know, you're going to have people who have had dengue or malaria or meningitis or yellow fever who have had high enough fever to cause deafness. So you're bound to run into deaf people in these areas. If you don't, you're just not looking hard enough.
We're headed to a spot known as the Village of the Tortoises. It's 6 hours up the Currenwas River, a place where the locals say there is a woman who does not speak. Gotcha.
All right.
Her name is Irania. She's the mother of 2. Her family says that she's been deaf since she was a child. She has never heard or seen a language. In fact, she doesn't know her own name or the names of her children.
Those are the names that she
Those
has
are
for her children.
right now, right.
Small child, larger
5,
child,
right.
essentially.
With this first contact, Kegl tries to communicate with pictures.
I pointed out the lightning, but she said, don't know.
No word for that. What does this do?
What this does is just sees what she has labels for. Just going to show her pictures, and I'm going to see what her gesture is.
Kegl guides Irania through a series of tests that prove she is bright and capable. Her lack of language comes only from the fact that in her 25 years, she has never seen or heard a conversation.
What really struck me was the anguish in her face. And what it said to me, at least, was, I know the answer, but I can't tell you.
Irania, to me, was a really bright woman. She knew exactly what she didn't know. She knew exactly what she couldn't do. She actually could look at me when I gave her certain things to try to gesture back to me and say, I can't do that.
And it's likely too late to do it now. Irania is too old to learn with the ease of a child. Kegl's research suggests that the brain is open to language until the age of 12 or 13, and then the opportunity begins to close.
This is what we mean when we say this is a person isolated from language.
So far, Kegl has found about 300 people just like Irania. They're invaluable to research, among the only people on Earth who can provide clues to the beginning of human communication. But over time, Kegl couldn't get over the tragedy of it. She couldn't watch another generation lost to language. Five years ago, Kegl decided that in addition to studying, she'd better start teaching. She and her husband, James, started a one-room school on the Mosquito Coast to teach the new sign language. He gave up a career as a pilot. Now they run the school solely on donations. They call it the Escuelita, or Little School, and it's opening the world to those without language.
When I was little, I would look at books in my house. I would look at them, but I didn't know what they said.
The language opened those books to Daphne Rodriguez and 30 other students here in the Escuelita. Their signs fill the air with meaning. The youngest kids are telling stories from their favorite books. Older students in this corner are learning geology. And the teenagers are debating Homer's Odyssey. Daphne is studying modern history. Watch her tell her version of the Exxon Valdez disaster in a whole new language.
And the man who was the pilot, who was in charge of steering it, he was somebody who really liked rum, and he got snockered. And he was really tired, so he changed with this other guy who accepted to steer the boat, but he was clueless as to what he was supposed to do. And something went wrong. He hit the boat against something, and all the oil started to spill out all over the place.
Could you have learned that history in your old school?
Oh, no way. No way.
With language, they are filled with questions, even a few questions for us.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any children?
2 children.
What about cats? You got cats?
I have 1 cat.
And you don't have any rabbits, do you?
No rabbits. No rabbits.
Okay, how about a parrot? Do you have a parrot?
I have no parrots.
Okay, I got one.
Yes, ma'am.
How old are you?
How old am I? I am 42. Very, very old.
Do you work?
Yet this is my work. This is what I do. Can you believe they pay me for this? I'm a reporter.
They are smart as they can be.
Right. All we have to do is unlock one little piece of their brain.
What has that told you about how the brain works and how language works?
Well, bottom line, I'm convinced that language is in the brain, but I'm also convinced that language needs a trigger. A person who's deaf, a gesturer left in the home, will remain languageless. We are born with the language instinct. Yeah, true, we're born able to walk. But if you tie a person down and you don't let them walk, it's not going to happen. And you can't malnourish a child in terms of language.
Which is why the Kegels go to great lengths to keep their students in school. Sometimes they have to find kids who are missing because of hunger or disease.
It's a lovely little road.
In fact, the day we first met little Judy Mejia, we had to look for her at her grandmother's house.
Thanks. Where is it from here?
Up here.
Just up here?
She had missed school, and the Kegels were worried.
¿Dónde está Judy?
Once before, they came out here and found Judy near death, burning with dengue fever.
Is Judy here?
It turns out Judy's grandmother had run out of food again and wanted Judy to stay home to work.
How do I say that I'm very happy to meet her?
Say I'm
Show me
happy.
how. Happy
I'm happy to meet you.
to meet you.
Thinks your signs are funny.
Well, I'm just beginning. I don't know very much.
Eventually, the grandmother agreed to send Judy back to school.
I mean, when I look at her signing today, it's just important.
You saved her life. Not just physically, but you opened the world to her
Well,
in language.
me? No, but the program here, Deaf People in Nicaragua, when I think about what she'd be,
Why do you feel so strongly about that?
with Judy, because she's what every one of them could have been.
What every one of the deaf in Nicaragua could have been if language had reached them sooner. Today, Nicaraguan Sign Language is reaching farther, and like any true language, it's taken on a life of its own, growing, adding new words all the time. Little Judy showed us that the children are still creating when she told us about a trip to the beach and threw out a new gesture that Kegl had never seen.
The symbol for sand was new to you.
In the context, I wasn't sure what she was using it.
Where did she learn this word?
I don't know.
Just picked it up.
Just knew it.
Thank you.
Welcome.